If you're looking to grow your indoor gardens, make sure you stick around, because I'm going to reveal to you one of the easiest and most foolproof ways of propagating your indoor plants. Okay, so the feature plant in this tutorial is going to be this beautiful Monstera Albo. Now I've had this Monstera for about a month now. Now the main aspect that excited me most about this plant, besides the beautiful variegation, were the fantastic aerial roots, which we have down the bottom. Now as you can see, these roots are very long and healthy, and since the time I've had this plant, this aerial root here has almost doubled in length, and this one has also developed and shot out. So when I saw the development of these aerial roots, I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to share with everyone on this channel how I air layer these aerial roots so I can easily propagate this Monstera without putting any of the cuttings at risk. And it is a game-changing technique. So I don't want to hold you in any more suspense, so let's get going. So first up, before we begin, I just wanted to make a point that you can actually use this technique with any plants that produce aerial roots. Because the philosophy behind this technique is to encourage the aerial roots to develop its own entire root system. So that essentially means we're going to be encasing the aerial root in a moist growing medium. And the reason why I love this technique is because it's really easy and it is extremely budget friendly. Because all you need is a growing medium, a propagation container, and some clear cling film. Now my choice of growing medium is sphagnum moss. And the reason why I like sphagnum moss is it retains a really good amount of water, but also not too much so as to risk rotting the root. So before we begin the process, I just wanted to show you a close-up of the aerial root. Now you can see this aerial root is actually very long. And the reason why I've chosen to do the video now is because this aerial root actually is long enough so that I can sit the container on the surface of the soil. Now you don't have to sit the container on the soil, but it's actually very convenient, which is ideal. And I thought I'd make the point here that if you're not interested in propagating a plant and you just want to see it mature and grow into a beautiful large house plant, you can actually guide the aerial roots into the soil, like this aerial root here. And that helps to stabilize the plant, but also acts as another source of water, because when I water the plant, this aerial root will actually be able to absorb water as well. But in this situation, we're going to be developing the root system while it is still attached to the plant. And that is one of the main reasons why I love this technique. Because when you're trying to get a cutting to root, it's at risk of not developing a root system and can easily fade away. And you can face many challenges, like I did when I was trying to get my Epipremnum pinnatum dragon's tail to root. And I'll put a link in the description below because I actually did finally get that stubborn cutting to root. And if you're interested in seeing how I did do it, I encourage you to jump on over and check out that video. But in this case, when you're air layering an aerial root on the living plant, there is very little risk that you're going to kill the cutting and the plant, because your plant will actually be able to survive off the existing root system as well as receive energy from photosynthesis from the other leaves. Another reason why it's a low risk strategy, because if your propagation is in the unfortunate position of developing root rot, you can simply cut off the rotten parts and your plant will still be safe from any disease and any risk. And the last reason why I prefer this strategy to any other propagation technique, after your aerial root has developed a root system, your cutting is ready to go. And that means when I go to propagate and cut the stems away, it has a system that is already receiving plenty of moisture and can sustain the cutting while it air dries. And once a stem has calloused over, I can easily transfer the developed root system into aroid potting mixture with minimal interruption to the plant. Again, I've got another video where I've transferred another beautiful Monstera Albo from water cuttings into soil. So for all those beginner plant parents out there who haven't transferred a rooted cutting into soil, I encourage you to go check that out because there's some wonderful tips in there that will get you through the stressful process. That's enough talk. Let's get into the process of air layering this aerial root. Okay, so like I showed you earlier, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your propagation container can fit nicely. Now for me this is sitting quite nicely because it's not covering too much of the soil surface, allowing for moisture to evaporate, but it's long enough for the aerial root to continue growing, and I expect it to start developing roots and circle around the bottom. Now what we have here is pre-moistened sphagnum moss. Now for when you're putting sphagnum moss into your propagation container, you want to make sure that it's moist but not too moist. Now what you can see here, it is way too moist, and if I were to put that straight in, it's likely to develop root rot because you can see it's extremely saturated. Now you may be asking yourself, what is too moist and what is not moist enough? And the rule of thumb I like to use is to pick up a nice handful of wet sphagnum moss and just wring it out like you would a sponge. And hopefully you can see the difference there. This one is saturated and this one is just moist enough to encourage the roots to develop. So what you want to do is put the sphagnum moss in and surround the aerial root. And what we're doing with the sphagnum moss is creating a moist environment. And the humidity, the additional humidity and the moisture will encourage roots to develop on the aerial root and support the system as it develops. Now I'll bring you in for a close-up. You can see that I've filled the container up with damp sphagnum moss, and I can already see that some of the moisture is condensating on the side of the container, which is exactly how we want it. The final step of the process is to encase the propagation container using some cling film, and this is going to trap the moisture inside and create a nice humidity chamber. And that's it really. We've just created an air layering propagation chamber. And as for maintenance, because this is enclosed, you won't need to do too much watering of it. Every now and again you might want to open it up and make sure that the moss is still damp, because the water is actually very critical in stimulating or activating the root growth. I've been really looking forward to this update because today we get to peek into this little air propagation that I set up 2 weeks ago. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you here because I fought temptation over the past 2 weeks to check on this so that I can give you a live unveiling of the air propagation in here on this channel. Now this could be a complete disaster and we may find that the aerial root has rotted, let's hope not, or we may find that there's no roots at all and it's just been sitting in some damp moss. Who knows? Best outcome, we'll see some healthy white roots that have started growing from the aerial root, and we'll also see if there's any secondary roots so that we can start propagating this into some aroid mint. So stick around because we're going to check into this right now. So here is a bird's eye view of the air layering experiment that we're doing on this Monstera Albo. Now I know that's a bit difficult to see because of the bushy leaves up here, so I'm going to do my best to give you a good view of it. Now I haven't opened or watered this container since I started the experiment. And you can still see on the edges of the container that there's still evaporation and condensation and plenty of moisture in there. So there's been a wonderful humid climate contained in this humidity chamber that we created. And you can actually see, now that I've got the container up close, I can see there's a nice thick root here. So that is promising signs that we've got a bit of root activity in here. So without further ado, let's dive in and see what we have. So it's a delicate process removing sphagnum moss, and it's probably one of the downsides of propagating in sphagnum moss. It's because you need to be quite delicate with the roots around it, and you can't see where the roots are. So it's a process of slowly removing the sphagnum moss so that we don't damage any of the new roots that have developed. So I can feel from the moss as I remove it, it is still very moist and damp, so that's a good sign. Okay, so some good news and bad news. So hopefully the camera's focusing in on the container here. Now there hasn't been the extent of root development that I was hoping for. You can see that the aerial root has continued to grow, and actually the good news is the color of the aerial root, if I can get a close-up of the shot, is healthy. It's white, it's furry, which means that it's developing a good healthy skin on it. And the tip of the aerial root is actually showing some very healthy signs with new growth and development. So very happy with the main aerial root growth. Now the sad news is there hasn't been any other root development from the main aerial root. And I know it looks like there is some around it, but I think that is just sphagnum moss. So I was actually hoping for a bit more root development and root activity, but it looks like 2 weeks in the humidity chamber probably wasn't enough for this. And what I'll probably do as next steps is re-moisten the sphagnum moss, repack it into the humidity chamber, and we'll leave it for another 2 weeks before we check in on again. And hopefully by then we'll see a bit more root development and root activity so that we can propagate this cutting directly into soil. Okay, so I have a small container of filtered water here, and what I'm going to do is pack the sphagnum moss back into the propagation container and re-establish the humidity chamber to keep going with this propagation technique. Now make sure you fluff up the sphagnum moss in when you're putting it in, just so that it doesn't have big patches of moisture and reduces the risk of any fungus growing. Because when you squeeze out the water, you can see it packs it very tightly. So we just want to fluff that back up. Make sure there's plenty of air circulation. So we're going to reapply the same cling film to the humidity chamber. Make sure it's as airtight as possible. And you also want to make sure that the container is not sitting directly on top of the soil, just so that oxygen can get into the soil and it doesn't trap moisture down there. So there you have it, a 2-week update on the air layering propagation technique that we're using on this Monstera. So obviously the video didn't go as well as I was hoping, but clearly we need to exercise a bit of patience here. And this is a great opportunity to emphasize the importance of patience in the indoor plant world. Sometimes expectations aren't met and things just don't go as planned. So I still have high hopes for this propagation. Like I said earlier, I'm going to give this another 2 weeks. Hopefully you're enjoying the updates that we're delivering to you on this channel. If you haven't already, please do us a small favor and hit that subscribe button, or drop a comment below and let us know what kind of experiments you want to see on our channel. And if you have any questions, by all means, leave them down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and as we always say, go get your hands dirty. See ya!